Greetings students, I am Professor K Mohangi and welcome to this lesson on the module The Learning Child. The module code is ETH102L. So the purpose of today's lesson is to basically revise some of the work that you have covered this year. I would like to actually focus on a few of the chapters from your prescribed textbook. I know that it is difficult. The content of the book is difficult, so I'm going to try to go through a few of the chapters that I think are important and give you some guidelines. All right? So for the content of this lesson here, as I said, I'm doing an overview of the module. I am going to focus on chapters 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I think by now you should know that that covers the curriculum basically for ETH102L. I will give you brief chapter summaries. Please note it's only limited information that I'm providing today. Students need to study in detail. Then I will take you through the importance of the tutorial letters for your study preparation. I have a disclaimer. Please note that these slides that you are being presented with and my presentation are not a scope for the exam. They are merely meant to help you with examination revision. All right, so the slide there that you have in front of you is the New Learning Revolution. That's your prescribed textbook. I'm hoping that many of you have it already. If not, try to borrow one so you can have a head start on your study preparation. So your study material, let's quickly go through that. You need your study guide. You need your tutorial letter 101. Remember 101 had your assignment 1 and your assignment 2. You need tutorial letter 102, and 102 is the revised study guide. It has updated information on the prescribed textbook, which is a 2005 edition. And you need tutorial letter 201, which is the latest one that was uploaded on the MyUnisa site. It has your multiple choice question answers, and it has your assignment 2 guidelines that we used when we marked your assignment. Last week, I uploaded an additional support document on the MyUnisa platform, giving you feedback on the challenges that students experienced on the assignments. Right, let's go to tutoring. So with all the support we are providing you, we also have your tutoring that I want you to access. First, you have your e-tutors, make use of them. They're there to help you. Then you have face-to-face tutors. You have your primary lecturer, myself, who's available via email or telephone during the exam period, and your secondary lecturers who will be there to assist you as well. Our information is available in tutorial letter 101, should you be looking for it. Okay, so let's quickly go through a few of the chapters from your prescribed textbook. Let's start with chapter 3. This is one of the most important chapters in the textbook. You would have noticed that for your multiple choice question assignment 1, a lot of the questions were taken from this chapter here. And the reason for that is that you need to have a basic understanding of certain parts of the brain, and you'll see on the slide in front of you, I've given you some of the basic areas that you need to have an understanding of. I will not go through all of it. You can read on that in your own time. Intelligence and talents. This is something that students do struggle with. Try to understand what is the difference between intelligence and what's the difference with talent. How are they similar and how are they different? It's there in your textbook and it's in your study guide as well. And if you still experience problems, do contact us. We will help you further with detailed explanations. Point number 3 on the slide is another area that students struggle to understand. So I'm going to spend a minute or two explaining this. So it says there, what is a myth? M-Y-T-H. What does a myth mean? In the textbook, there's a lot of focus on this word, but they do not clearly explain it to students. So a myth is an untruth. it is something that is not true. It's made up, it is false, it's a misconception. So the example I am giving you here, it is a myth that we all learn best in the same way. Now that statement is not true, as we all learn in different ways, and I think you know that as well. Therefore, the statement is a myth. It is untrue. Okay, I hope that clarifies that for you. The next part in chapter 3, we talk about brain networks. The physical, the sensory, emotional, chemical, electrical, biological, the cognitive. How the brain networks with all of these different pathways. Right. Then we have the left and right hemisphere of the brain. Let's look at some of the primary functions. Remember, there's many primary functions. I am merely giving you a few examples. For example, the left brain. What is the left brain responsible mainly for? So we talk about analytical thinking, words, logic, numbers, maths, example. The right brain, we are more involved with creative aspects, art, pictures, rhythm, rhyme, music. For example, people who are architects and musicians, we would say they are right brain dominant. Right. The other pathways to the brain is via your senses, how we see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and do. Those are very important for you to know how these pathways work, so you as a teacher can help the child in your class to find the correct pathway and how to learn to actually accelerate their learning. Right, number 7, your brain-friendly diet. I am not going through this because I think you understand what a brain-friendly diet is. And the last point on that slide, emotional intelligence. In your textbook, Goldman talks about emotional intelligence and he talks about intellectual intelligence, IQ versus EQ. So, why is emotional intelligence seemingly more important than IQ? Go and read about that. I'd like to hear your responses. Perhaps on the MyUnisa platform, you can discuss that with me. So when we talk about multiple intelligences or different intelligences, you need to know the characteristics or the traits. Characteristics and traits are similar words, right? And as a teacher or as a parent, how do you strengthen for this characteristic or trait in a child or in yourself as well? Now, I've made a reference here because in your textbook, this aspect of multiple intelligences is available in chapter 3 and in chapter 9, and I've indicated the page numbers to you as well. So let me quickly go through that list. I will not explain it. I'm simply going to list it. You go now and look at the characteristics and how to strengthen each one of those. Verbal linguistic, logical mathematical, musical, visual spatial, bodily kinesthetic, interpersonal or social, intrapersonal or introspective, naturalist. Now, sorry, can I just go back to, I want you to pay attention to interpersonal and intrapersonal. I find that students often confused with those two. Remember, inter is how you interact with other people, whereas intra is within yourself, those characteristics. Right? Let's go on. Right, so I spoke about myths earlier. Again, it comes up here, and look at the great myths of learning and intelligence. You'll find it listed in your study guide again. You would have had questions based on that in your assignment too, so I think it's important for you to go through that. Let's go through talents, types of inbuilt talent. Again, the word inbuilt would mean intra, within yourself. What types of talents are inbuilt within yourself? So we have striving talent, thinking talent, and relating talent. So striving talent is the achiever, you have stamina, competence, you have belief in yourself, you're on a mission, you're striving for something better. Thinking talent is a focused person, you're disciplined, you are more numerical, you have a business mind and an analytical mind. Relating talent is a person with empathy, a team person. You have interpersonal characteristics are very good. So those are the different types of talents that you can read further about in chapter 3. So let's go through chapter 4 very briefly now. Here, chapter 4 says learning how to learn. It's called the Teach Yourself Revolution. And there's much discussion in chapter 4 in your textbook on sport and the role that sport plays in teaching yourself. So what are the lessons one can learn from sport? Now, when you're studying for exams, and this is a section that you need to look at, don't simply list, for example, have a dream, have a specific goal. Try to combine that into the classroom practice when you are teaching children. How can you use these lessons to emphasize the lesson you are teaching in the classroom for yourself or the kids you are teaching? So try to relate it to the classroom practice. That is the link between theory and practice that we are looking for, application. How do you apply what you have learned to real life situations? Right. So the next point there in chapter 4 that's very important for you to know is the use of mind maps. Okay, what are the principles when using mind maps? Like I said previously, the textbook and the study guide would list principles. There are 9 principles to developing a mind map. One of it is imagine. Your brain cells are like trees, with each one storing related information on its branches. But I want you now to link that to the classroom situation. How are you going to use this information to help your students learn better how to use a mind map? The next point is linking tools as memory pegs. We say make associations. Teach the kids how can you use a memory or an association, a link to music, to use that as a memory peg so that it triggers whatever has been learned. Right. And we come now to music and learning and the importance of that. So chapter 5 in your book talks about learning how to think. It's called the Creative Revolution. And it gives you details on how you can produce ideas and new ideas. And you'll notice on the slide that an idea is a new combination of old elements. I think that's quite a nice thing from your textbook as well. So, critique the existing education system. Remember, we have to use Bloom's taxonomy, where we ask basic knowledge questions, but we also have to ask you higher order thinking. This is the application type of questions in your exams. Look at assignment 2, where we asked you to apply, where we asked you to critique. And this is one of the types of questions that we can ask. So for example, when you're asked to critique the existing education system, you talk about the pros and the cons, what works, what does not work, and what needs to happen. So that is the way you critique the pros, the cons, what more can be done. Whenever you have a question of that nature, think, structure your answer in terms of what you have on the slide in front of you. Right. So I'm not going to talk about producing ideas. I have the page number, page 220 in your textbook. There's a list there that gives you how to produce ideas, how you can apply this to the classroom. So before I start with chapter 8, you will notice, students, that a lot of what I am talking about here and my reference to the kids you are teaching, the students you are teaching, you apply it to yourself as well in your daily living. When you're feeling stuck or you're feeling unsure of how to study or what to do next, go back to your book, go back to your prescribed textbook and see how this can work for you. For example, the last point on the slide there on producing ideas is absolutely wonderful. Go and read that and see how you can use that and apply it to your life. So you'll notice now that we've skipped few chapters. So we went up to 3, 4, and 5. Chapter 6 and chapter 7 are not part of this module here. They are used in another module, so don't worry to study that at all. Right, so we're going on to chapter 8 now, the teaching revolution. So now we're going to focus more on the classroom and the teacher. How can a teacher plan and teach more effectively? So on the slide in front of you, I have listed from your textbook a number of different ways in which a teacher can plan and teach more effectively. For example, creating a warm, welcoming teaching and learning environment. But students, you do not need to stick with the list that I've given you. A question like this is a very open-ended question. We are welcoming creative, different ideas from students. We want to see your own thinking come through. So when we mark a question like this, we mark very, I won't say leniently, but very carefully, and we want to see what did you learn throughout the chapters in this book. So you'll see the last point I made there, what are the other factors? What else can you think of? What more can you do in the class? So I have a quotation there on the slide. It says, to learn anything fast and effectively, you have to see it, hear it, and feel it. Basically, it means going back to different types of modalities in which children learn, in which adults learn. You cannot only learn from one modality. Use that in your study techniques right now. Don't only read from the slides and your textbooks. Listen to yourself. Be able to discuss it with someone. Phone your lecturer. Talk to somebody, and the information is likely to retain longer in your memory. So, what are other factors that affect learning ability, and how do these factors influence our children in the classroom? So the first one we talk about is the learner's physical environment. And here it's not only the classroom environment, it's also the home environment. It can be community environment. If a child is struggling to learn, look at all of those factors. For example, what about the light? Is the light in the classroom good enough? Is it too cool? Is it too warm? What about the resources? Does a child have a comfortable chair to sit on? Resources at home? When you give a child homework, take that into consideration. Are the resources sufficient at home for the child to be able to execute those tasks? Again, questions like these are open-ended. You need to use your imagination, your creativity when you're answering questions of this nature here. The point on emotional state, we talked about physical environment. The next one is the child's emotional state. In the current climate that we're living in, peer influence leading to anxiety, depression, bullying is rife. Teachers need to be cognizant of these factors here and how it affects a learner's ability to learn. The last point there is the child's social needs. So when a child comes to school, the child is not simply a scholar or a learner, the child is also a social being. And being a social being, the child needs friendships. So be aware of a child who's seemingly being isolated or being bullied, or if there's undue peer influence, the effects of social media, what other factors can you think of? So these are the things you need to keep in mind when we talk about how learning and factors affect children's learning. So although I say we are very lenient and we mark with an open mind such questions, we also look for logic, coherence, and it's got to make sense. It's got to answer the question that we pose to you as well. Okay. Why is music important for learning? We are still on chapter 8 of the textbook. What are the benefits of music? Why do we need to introduce it in the classroom? The last point, how can we introduce music in the classroom? Not just what are the benefits, we know the benefits, but how do you now introduce music in the classroom? And that is an application type question. Right, let's go on. So in chapter 9, I am linking you back to chapter 3. So I'm cross-referring from chapter 3 and chapter 9 because in your textbook, there's a lot of overlap in the kind of content when they talk about multiple intelligences and learning styles. So here again, I'm emphasizing that for each of the different intelligences, as indicated in your textbook, you need to know the likely traits, the characteristics, and how can the teacher and the parents strengthen for better learning. In your textbook, you will also find examples of popular people out there who have specific kinds of intelligences. What are their traits? What careers can you likely follow? So that makes for very interesting reading and for background knowledge as well. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about the types of thinking styles. We learned about multiple intelligences. We've learned about different talents. Let's talk about thinking styles. And here you can refer to page 367 of your textbook if you have that. If you don't, I've summarized the points for you on the slide there. So students sometimes struggle to understand each of these. What is a concrete sequential style of thinking? These are the people who are based in reality. They process information in an ordered, sequential, linear manner. If you think brain hemisphere wise, like what I discussed earlier, I would say they are more the left brain kind of thinkers. Okay. The second point is a concrete random thinkers. We say they are the experimenters. They like to experiment, they like trial and error, they like to find alternatives, they like to do things in their own way. Right? The third one is abstract random. The abstract random kind of thinkers, they think through reflection and they thrive in unstructured, people-oriented environments. So it's hardly likely that you're going to find abstract random people working in an environment where they got to be all by themselves. They need to interact with others. They need lack of structure, but they would do well in an environment such as that. The last point is the abstract sequential thinkers. So these are the thinkers who love the world of theory and abstract thought. They think in concepts and they analyze information. They make good philosophers and research scientists. They pay attention to key points, details, and their thinking processes are logical, rational, and intellectual. So I'm hoping now with that slide there, this makes a bit more sense to you and you understand it a bit better, right? So, as a teacher or for yourself, how would you determine what your learning style is? As we said earlier, we all have different learning styles. We can have a combination of all of them. Sometimes you will notice it's more predominant in one than in the other. For example, if you're a visual learner, okay, what do you think, if you're a teacher, how would you recognize a visual learner in class? Right? How would you recognize an auditory learner? How would you recognize a bodily kinesthetic learner or a tactual learner? Often, children who are bodily kinesthetic learners are the ones who like to move around. They need to move around the classroom. They are the ones that would not sit still at the desk. They would rumble in the bags, causing some kind of disruption. But as a teacher, if you understand the type of learning, you would make accommodations for this child here. So your textbook has a lot of information on this. Go and read. It's very, very interesting for you as a person as well. So chapter 10 is the catch-up programs. So what I'd like you to know before I start with chapter 10 is that our prescribed textbook is obviously not South African. It's based in the UK, and a lot of what they talk about there is not available in our country here. But we can use the information that we are gaining from the textbook and make it work in our country here. We can use a lot of the different types of catch-up programs, for example, peer tutoring. We will talk about that in a little while, but those are the areas that you can apply if there's an application type question. And one of the key examples in chapter 10 is to do with Helen Keller. There's often a question asked about it, and the reason for that is that Helen Keller was deaf, blind, and mute, but she learned to read Braille, she learned to write, and she learned to speak, which means that any person can learn in their own way and in their own time. So what we are saying here is the importance of support in the learner's ability to learn. And there are 5 main factors that helped Helen Keller overcome the challenges that she had experienced. And those factors were time to learn in her own time and not rushed, context, culture, a culture of learning, home environment that supported learning, the support that she received from home and her tutor and the people around her, and the freedom to choose. Unfortunately, with our education system, we don't have much choice in freedom to choose. But if you did have freedom to choose, you could choose subjects and make choices that interest you and aligns with your thinking style and your multiple intelligence as well. That second point there that's also very important is the mind-body connection and the mind-brain connection. So you know that your mind and your body doesn't work in isolation. We call it a great feedback loop. They function together in a great feedback loop. Each affects the other and causes chain reactions. And they play an important part in overcoming learning difficulties. Now, the reason I'm focusing on the mind-body connection and the mind-brain connection is when you go back and look at the problems that children have that impede their learning ability. Remember, I spoke about physical, emotional, social needs. If those are not met, and you are going to have this feedback loop and the child is not going to learn effectively. So keep that in mind. So as I said earlier, there's examples of catch-up programs that's provided in your textbook that you can adapt to be used in your classroom are the ones that I have listed on the slide there. All of them can be used in your classroom. So go and read up about it. There's a lot more that's listed, but I find that these are the ones that's really going to work to help children who have a backlog in the learning and now they need to catch up. Right, so go through that. So we are on to the last chapter of your textbook. It's chapter 11. It's called the High School Revolution. And the most important parts of this here is the features of successful high schools. And in this chapter, it is phenomenal the kind of successes that schools internationally are experiencing. So if you read carefully, you will notice the schools in Japan, in China, first world, well-resourced, wealthy countries are doing very well. However, we need to see what can we take from there, what will work in our country and in our classrooms, and adapt it to suit us. Okay, so some of the features of successful high schools that I picked up from chapter 11. So you demand more of each child. So some of you might have studied psychology, you would know about self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell a child you're not good enough, you can't do this, the child is going to start to believe that. But if you demand more of each child, push the ceiling, surely it'll get better for them. Teachers have fewer than 150 students each. Okay, I'm not sure how this is going to work in our country, but we can try. One of the other features of a successful high school is to increase the class time. For example, going from a 45-minute lesson to a 90-minute lesson class time. Obviously, it will be for secondary school learners, and the reason for that is to be focused. So you have fewer lessons for the day, but a longer duration. This seems to be working in other international countries. Right, let's go to point number 4, where it says, let's get teachers talking, communicating with each other, discussing how we can support learners and not work in isolation. And the last point there, teachers need to design work to be showcased. Showcased meaning allow your students to put up their work, their projects, and celebrate their successes there. And see, that is also a point that seems to be working well. So on the slide here from points 6 to 11, I won't discuss it. I think it's quite self-explanatory. But I want you to now reflect on the last line of the slide here. What are your views on project-based learning? So there's a move away. In your textbook, you'll notice in chapter 11 on successful high school, there's a project-based learning. What do you think about it? What are your views? Remember, I spoke to you earlier about critique. How do you critique a comment or a statement given to you? Think about this and give me your views on the discussion forum. Right. This here, I've indicated it because it's one particular high school model. Again, it's called the Mount Edgecombe High School model that gives you points that can be utilized in our country, certain points, of course, not all of them, that teachers can use to help develop more successful high schools. So, for example, a question that I can possibly ask is, if you were the principal of a high school, what points can you take from the Mount Edgecombe High School model to help your school become a highly successful school? Right? It's something like that. So again, on that last slide there, I said etc., meaning that list is not exhaustive. There's a lot more that can be added to that list. Okay, students, I think you can totally do this. I think you need to keep calm, and I wish you good luck. I am available, as I said, right through to your exams. You're welcome to call me, or the best thing is email with questions, with queries, and we are here to support you. All the best.